What's up, guys? Welcome back to the One Man Show, the number one fight podcast, the only fight podcast in Singapore. I am the man, and over there we have multi-time boxing champion and the number two pound for pound champion in Singapore now, Muhammad the Chosen One, Ridhwan. And today, guys, we actually have Brazilian BJJ royalty in the house, all the way from New York, Mr. Robert Degle. How are you doing, sir?
Very good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Right. Before we continue, I just want to put out a disclaimer. Now, I'm no BJJ expert, and Ridhwan, I think he once acted as a mixed martial arts fighter in a drama, and he sucks at it, just like how he sucks in real life. So we're going to apologize in advance to all, because we know the BJJ community is highly critical and very involved and very opinionated. We're not going to go deep into BJJ stuff. We're just going to say what we think we know. And, if we're wrong about it, then I'm sorry. But I think Singaporeans are critical altogether. So suck it up or don't listen to us. It's fine. And
I can contribute with any jiu-jitsu mistakes. I'll try. But that's correct.
Now, the biggest reason why we have Robert on the show is, Robert comes from the infamous or the notorious Danaher Death Squad, DDS, well known for their leg locks in jiu-jitsu, well known in the jiu-jitsu world as murderers on the mat. And he is coming and staying in Singapore. Am I right?
Yeah. I'm very, very happy about that. Can't wait to get there.
Now, Robert, just to kick things off, I mean, you've been to, many places around the world. You've conducted seminars here and there. Why do you want to leave New York for Singapore?
Yeah, so in one sense, I don't really want to leave New York per se, but in another sense, I do. So basically, one of the things that I really don't like about New York is the price of living here. It's like very, very expensive. And also, it's very hard to make a living as a jiu-jitsu instructor here unless you own your own school. I was teaching at two different schools here, and it just was not enough money. And I was also working like a regular non-jiu-jitsu job, right? So I definitely could have made it work, but it was like very, very difficult. And I prefer to just teach jiu-jitsu. And I was teaching a lot of seminars in other countries, and some people had offered me jobs in a few different countries. And the one that I liked the most was Singapore. I get asked all the time, like, why I like Singapore so much. And like, okay, so basically, I'll give you guys my brief history with Singapore. So years ago, I used to work in Times Square in New York City, and we would get tons of tourists. And this is like a long time ago. This is when I was like 20 years old. Okay, I was an undergraduate in college at this point. And this woman, this like middle-aged woman, she came into the store that I was working at, and she was with her daughter who was studying here in New York, and they were Singaporean. And I don't even remember how the conversation got started. My job, one of the major aspects of my job was literally talking to tourists. I really liked it. It was a good job. It was in the Disney store in Times Square, if you can believe it. Yeah.
Cute.
I loved it. I actually talked to so many people from around the world in that store. It was really cool. I got to talk to, I forget his name, a very well-respected jiu-jitsu black belt that has had success in the UFC. He came into that store. I forget his name though, but we had a good conversation regardless anyway. So this Singaporean woman and her daughter came in, and I started, like I said, I don't remember how we started talking, but I do remember the conversation. And especially the woman, the daughter contributed a lot to the conversation too, but especially the woman, she like really convinced me that Singapore was this amazing country. She's like, it's the best country ever, right? And I was like, okay, I never heard of it at this time. And I was like, at the time, I never left the United States. So I was like, okay, wow, it sounds really cool there. Like I remember I went home that night, and at the time I was living with my my girlfriend. We had an apartment on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I was telling her, I was like, I met these people, and they told me that like this small Southeast Asian country is like, sounds so amazing. Like I really want to go there someday. So you fast forward a few years after that, and one of my teammates at Henzo's, Grant K-Ball, he's an amateur MMA fighter. He had a tournament in Singapore, an amateur MMA tournament. Yeah. And he wanted someone to come coach him. And we had trained, for a long, long time together. And we had gone to many tournaments together. So I knew his game really well. And so he thought to ask me. He's mainly a grappling-based MMA fighter, right? I couldn't really coach a striker. It's just not my forte. But for a grappling-based MMA fighter, I definitely can help. So yeah, we worked on a game plan and things like that. And then it was pretty hectic because before I flew out to Singapore, I was teaching seminars in the US. So I was like from flight to flight. And the second I landed, I had to go right to the venue and coach him. And he actually did really well at first, but the problem was he gassed. He stuck to the game plan well, but just gassed. The guy he fought was like a really experienced fighter. So I thought Grant did well, but, fell short, but still did pretty well. But then basically that meant that him and I had like a whole week and a half in Singapore with not much else to do. I had some seminars booked, but other than that, we just had free time. And we trained at like a bunch of different gyms. I made like local friends, like friends like Gary, Oz, Alvin. And like, I really liked it. One of the things I really liked about Singapore was that it was different enough from New York, but similar enough to New York. Okay. And so what I mean by that is like, so the things that I don't like about New York are not true about Singapore. So for instance, I was walking around Manhattan yesterday, and I was going through one of the train stations, and a woman bumped into me and she like cursed me out, even though she bumped into me. And like two hobos were like yelling at me, and like it's disgusting. Like that's what I don't like about New York. It's like it's a stereotype, but it's definitely true. Like when I was a kid, I remember the first place I ever went that wasn't New York, right? So I was born here and grew up here. I went on vacation with my family to Orlando, Florida. We went to like Disney World and stuff, right? And on that vacation, I remember thinking to myself, I'm like 6, 7, 8 years old, something like that. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, Florida is the cleanest place in the world. Because like at that time, and it's definitely not, right? But like at that time, my world was basically just New York. And I was like, it's disgusting here. It's really dirty everywhere, right? And obviously there's places that are not, right? I'm just talking generally, right? And I really distinctly remember that thought. And now that and obviously Singapore is the total opposite. Singapore is very clean. For some reason, even like the dirty parts of Singapore, even when there's like, it just doesn't feel as dirty. I don't even know how to really explain it. Like
have you been to Ridhwan's gym?
To what gym?
His gym.
I don't know. Maybe it's disgusting. I mean, obviously there's dirty places anywhere. It's pretty dirty.
Nah, I'm just shooting shit. I mean, he does keep it clean because he has to clean it himself.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, regardless, anyway. So like I was gonna say, like I've been to some restaurants in Singapore that like definitely like not on like the hyper clean end of things, but it just, I don't know, it didn't feel as like viscerally disgusting to me as some places in New York feel. Have either of you guys ever been to New York before?
No, I don't think we have. Have you, Juan? I mean, you've been to Vegas, right, Juan?
I've been to Vegas. I've been to Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so the train stations have the distinct smell of piss. And I'm really not making that up. It's very distinct. And it just like, you just get so used to it. And then by comparison, the MRT is like, it's unbelievably clean. And I really like that about the MRT. And the stuff that I like about New York, for instance, that it's the biggest thing that I like about New York, I would say the two biggest things, or maybe the three biggest things. It's very culturally diverse, which Singapore is also. It's very easy to get around via train, which again, Singapore is also, and Singapore's version is much cleaner. And then
it's probably more efficient also, right?
Yeah, I would say so. New York's is pretty old, so it's a little more complicated, and to build it has been more difficult. I know Singapore's was only built in the 80s, I think, right?
I know you seem to know Singapore history better than
I've read a lot about Singaporean history at this point because I'm interested. Right? If I'm going to live there, I want to know the place. But anyway, the last thing I was going to say was, oh yeah, and it's like it's very densely populated, which is something I like because like it means that there's more. So as a coach, for instance, I really like that because it means you're going to have more opportunities to work with serious and talented people, right? If you're living in a place that's not very densely populated, you kind of got to just work with whatever you got. You know what I mean? Because like if there's only like so many people in a town, then that's who you have to work with. Whereas in a city, I mean, the truth is you have endless opportunities to develop students. So that's a big, big plus, specifically as a coach. So, yeah.
Well, I think you also forgot to add in the other part, which is that we have 100 plus.
Oh, yeah, that too. Undeniably.
Which also happens to be your favorite drink right now.
It's one of them. The other one is, I'd say, so I also love Klook, which I've only seen in Taiwan. Klook is so good.
Yeah, let me ask you. So, are you still actively competing, or are you like ready to transition to a coach? Because we know you're moving here to be coaching full time, and you're like really looking forward to that. So, I guess you've been actively competing and also coaching back in New York. So, when you're moving here, I guess you're gonna be focusing on coaching full time.
No, yes, I'm going to be focusing very much on coaching, but I am still actively competing. I competed for the first time in months, a few days ago, actually, and I'm going to compete again in 2 weeks. That'll be the last time I compete. I think that'll be the last time I compete before I come to Singapore. And I still competing a lot, as much as I can, I'm basically all I'm going to do is coach and compete. That's more or less it.
So the responsibility that you have now is you're going to bring the DDS training system here in Singapore and to teach that specifically?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously any coach is going to teach in a way that's fairly specific to them, right? Like, so I've been trained by John Danaher. So obviously like his systems are a big part of my knowledge and what I plan on teaching. But I'm also going to teach, like I'm making my own innovations, like solving problems in new ways. Jiu-Jitsu systems are always open systems. They can never be closed systems, right? Like a closed system is a system that's, it's done. There's nothing more to do, right? You can never have that in a combat sport because the truth is people are always trying to adapt to, like beat people in new ways, right? So if I just came and I just taught like, well, this is what's on the DVDs, guys, I can't teach anything outside of that. I wouldn't be a very good coach. I would barely even consider myself a coach. I would, in that case, consider myself kind of I'm just conveying what's on the DVDs, right? I'm coming to teach as my instructor was taught to me, which is in a very open and innovative way. Yeah.
So I guess the lead locking thing is going to be like a huge thing in your teaching methods. For sure, yeah. So, I mean, leg locks are a big part of the game that we play at Renzo's. It's a big part of my game personally, right? Like, I think I'm most well known for my leg locks. The vast majority of the seminars that I've taught around the world have been leg lock seminars, though not all of them have been. I've also taught seminars on other topics. Yeah, so, I mean, I just think leg locks are effective techniques. So I'm definitely placing a heavy emphasis on them in the program.
Since we're touching on John Danaher and also leg locks in general, I think we over here at the show we worship Joe Rogan to a large extent. And, he had we call him Abang Joe Rogan. So Abang means brother in Malay, which is one of the languages here in Singapore. So we just call him Abang Joe, which is a very common name also in Singapore.
Okay.
So, what my question is, after listening to John Danaher on the Rogan show and actually talking to someone who knows him personally now, could you tell me, does he really talk like a wizard? Because the way he talks is fascinating.
I guess so. Like, I don't know. I guess because when I watched that podcast, I had already known him he was already my coach at that point. So I guess I was just used to it. Like, he talks in a very deliberate way, right? So it seems as if when he has things to say, that everything he's saying is very calculated, right? Nothing's accidental. So that's like, I guess, what gives him like the wizard-like qualities.
Yeah, I mean, when I was listening to it, I was like, if this was my teacher in school, I would definitely like do everything that he says, because he sounds like a real wizard, and on top of that, he can destroy me and he can kill me also. So I mean, moving on from that, you're going to start teaching at Evolve. Now, you said that you have had offers from all over the place to come and teach. Evolve is a big gym in Southeast Asia. Some would say the biggest fight gym in Asia itself. It's also a melting pot, just the way you like it. You don't get only Singaporeans in Evolve in Singapore. You get, the Thais are there with the Muay Thai. You get, a mixture of people from races all together. In a way, Evolve is kind of a reflection of Singapore in the sense that, everybody from different backgrounds, from different nationality come together. Other than that, which I think it's something that you've stated that you like, the diversity in cultures and all that. What else made you choose Evolve?
Well, so there was three main things. The first was that it was in Singapore, right? Which is the other offers were mostly in other countries. So yeah, I was considering them, but I definitely preferred Singapore to anywhere else I got an offer. The second one was that it allowed me to continue to have a relationship with, like, I still would have had a relationship, but more of a relationship with my coach, John Danaher. So because Evolve is that's where Danaher, he's taught seminars there in Asia. Gary fights for one. There's a connection there, right? So it allows me to, this was a really, really big part of the deciding factor, was that I'd be able to have a continued relationship with my coach. For instance, someday I want to get my black belt for him, right? That's a big long-term goal. And I felt as if it would be easier to do such things through Evolve than through other academies because of that close connection, right? It's just easier to stay in connection with, my team. I don't feel as if I'm leaving the squad. I am obviously physically, but I still see myself as, and I hope they continue to see me as one of their teammates. I don't see why they wouldn't, right? There's previous squad mates who have left geographically, but we've stayed in touch, and we're still in connection. And then the third thing was simply just like how big the gym is, right? In terms of like it's very well known. Like I knew what Evolve MMA was before I knew what Singapore was, right? Like I was a big fan of One. I used to watch One Championship back in the day. I mean, I still do, but like for instance, a fight that had a really big impact on me was Masakazu Imanari versus Kevin Bellingham. Like that's an old One Championship fight back in the day where Imanari won by heel hook. And I remember also looking up I was a big Shin Aoki fan, and I looked up where he was training at the time. At the time he was at Evolve, and having that previous mental connection with the gym, I have a lot of respect for a grappler like Aoki, and to see he used to teach there. They already have very good instructors there. it seemed like a good move for my career. I mean, my first day at Evolve, I stepped in the door, and the next person to walk in behind me was Alistair Overeem. And I was thinking, wow, yeah. So I was like, wow, all right. Like, this place attracts very talented people. And if you're going to be a coach, it's to your benefit to be coaching at a place where you're going to get opportunities to coach talented, serious people. So
I think it's apt that you bring up how you adore Shinya Aoki, because he's a big Evolve guy. I think he was one of the biggest signings that they had when they first started out. Evolve has grown so big now. I mean, recently I heard even Henry Cejudo went down after the first time he lost to Demetrius Johnson. So he just went out there, and then he was in Singapore 2-3 months, just hanging out at Evolve and trying to sort himself out before he came back to the US and eventually, kind of defeated Mighty Mouse. Even Mighty Mouse is affiliated with Evolve right now. They have a lot of top ranked guys. Now, the other thing that is also prevalent about people who train in Evolve is that, eventually training in Evolve is kind of a one-way route to, being signed by one championship. Mm-hmm. Now, you obviously have a name for yourself in Jiu-Jitsu. You come from a very famous school, and you have friends who fight for one championship also. Is there any thoughts of, maybe transitioning to MMA now that, the opportunity is there because you're in Evolve?
So it's funny, like, I've actually had some amateur MMA fights. I was mainly just going out there. I pulled guard in my fights. So I was literally, you can see it. It's on YouTube. I'm not making it up. I went out there just to try my jiu-jitsu on a different stage. And I had moderate success. I never got finished. I had 4 fights. I won 2 of them. I think I should have won 3 of them. And even the one that I lost, I think you could have made the case that it was a draw, but regardless, like, for a guy who had almost no striking experience, and I was literally just going out there pulling guard, I think I did pretty well for myself. And I have thought about, like, fighting again in the future. And I had thought to myself, if I was going to fight, the goal wouldn't be UFC. The goal would be one championship. And I don't know if I want to fight in the future, but I've actually thought about it. Like, I'm definitely open to it so the reason why I would want to fight doesn't have anything to do with wanting to be a professional fighter per se. The reason why I like to fight is because as a coach, my long-term goals are to coach high-level grapplers and MMA fighters. So I want to be able to assist in both areas. Okay. And I think that the more experience you have doing something personally, you don't have to do it, but it's definitely going to help, right? Mm-hmm. If I could have some more fights, just the experience of preparing for the fight and then the fight itself will help me in the long run be a better coach. You know what I mean? So that was the motivation. And also, like, it's a cool experience, I think, to have. Like, there will come a point in my life when I'm too old where it's just not feasible. Like, I can't do it. So yeah, but I might ultimately decide that I don't want to. I'm not sure. Right now it's not my priority. My priority is definitely on my competitive grappling career and coaching. Those coaching grapplers, right? Or also coaching MMA guys, but primarily grapplers. You know what I mean? So that's where the focus lies in the immediate future, but who knows where things will go. Grappling will always be, I'll say this, grappling will always be like my
number one.
Yeah, my number one. Yeah. But so just as I cornered my teammate Grant K-Ball in an MMA fight, and we worked on a very grappling heavy game plan, that's something I want to do more in the future.
All right. So I think since we're talking briefly about game plan, right? So you were cornering a friend of yours, and let's say, like, your base is grappling, that's your specialty. And the person is going against somebody who's good in striking, for example, boxing or Muay Thai, something like that. What are some of the things that you look out for in such a fight?
Well, you've got to think about the phases of combat, right? So obviously, the longer the fight remains on the feet, if they're a good boxer, then the odds of you getting lit up rise. So for instance, in Grant's fights, Grant is mainly a grappler, so we worked a lot on. We don't want to just shoot from the outside and get kneed in the face like Ben Askren did against us at all, right? That's the wrong thing about it, right? You want to set up your terrible. You want to set up your takedowns with strikes, right? In a way that like it flows naturally from one stage of combat to the next. So yeah, that, and then getting on the ground, and then strikes change grappling. I think people oftentimes exaggerate the extent to which they change grappling, right? Like people talk about jiu-jitsu as if it stops working once you put in strikes. No, it's another element, right? So it's similar in a sense actually to gi grappling. So when you throw a gi on somebody, it opens up your opportunities for offense, right? Where you can do things you couldn't do in no gi. Now, when you throw strikes into the equation, there's certain things which, so for instance, one of the top ways in MMA people take people's backs is through strikes. So you see people get to the mount, throw strikes, then the guy turns so they don't get hit directly in the face. Then you take it back. You can continue to strike them, and you can also look for strangles. This is very, very common. It's one of the most common ways you see people getting their backs taken in MMA. And so for instance, like BJ Penn in many of his fights did such a thing. Okay. Now the trick is in no gi, you could never do that. There's no way to encourage them to expose their back in the same way. So these small things are a part of why I like coaching MMA grappling, because there are different ways to go about solving the problem, right? So for instance, if I want to take someone's back, in MMA, we have a new way to do that, right? There's ways that you can do that where in no-gi grappling, it's just simply not available to you. So yeah, it's a fun challenge to have.
Yeah, so I guess to a lot of extent, striking, I mean, for you, for example, if you are fighting, right? So you need to have quite a high standard of striking to make your grappling effective. Do you think so?
I mean, it's not going to hurt, you know? Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to be like a professional fighter, like an MMA fighter, you should be good at everything, but you should be good at everything in a way that connects all of the different forms of combat together, right? So like, let's say hypothetically, we could take the number one kickboxer in the world and also at the same time, make him the number one grappler in the world. That doesn't guarantee he's going to be the number one MMA fighter in the world, because it could be the case that his kickboxing and his grappling do not flow in a synchronistic way. We want it to all. If you look at someone, for instance, like George St Pierre, he is a perfect example of somebody who he's not even the best kickboxer. He's not even the best grappler. But what he's the best at is fluidly connecting his kickboxing and his grappling. So that's the trick, right? So all fighters are going to have a natural tendency to favor certain approaches. Like for me, I always gravitated towards grappling. But you should have enough of the other areas that you can connect it all fluidly. And I mean, I obviously favor a grappling approach. I think grappling approaches are a little bit safer, you know, especially for the long term, right? You're not going to take as much damage, but there's no one right way to, forgive the expression, skin a cat, right? Like there's more, it's kind of a gruesome expression, but there's more than one way to go about doing these things. So, and I would never openly discourage a student from going one direction, so long as I think it's a valid way to solve the problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Robert, it's very interesting how you explain that, because it seems like, you know, we look you up on the internet before this, and you know, I've listened to a few of the podcasts that you've been on. You seem very, how do I say it? You know, you're very well thought out. You have a system of actually, you know, solving things, and it seems like, you know, there's always a few steps. You're very clear with your goals. You're very clear what you want to do, and you seem to know how to get it done. You know, we see that with in an interview where you say what your goals are in 2020 and stuff like that. Now, I've known, what I've read about with regards to jiu-jitsu is that jiu-jitsu is actually something highly addictive, which people, when they start learning jiu-jitsu, they become kind of a different person. They become very mellow out, very thought out. Yeah. Very zen. I think one of the books that I read was the Cauliflower Tales, about this guy who went to Hawaii to look for BJ Penn, and then he was training jiu-jitsu also. And he, throughout the book, he seems to change from a very wild college guy to a very thought out guy and stuff like that. For yourself, does that mindset, was that already there before jiu-jitsu, or was it there like after jiu-jitsu?
It was definitely already there. I think that mindset was a big part of why jiu-jitsu was attractive to me. But I will say that I went through a period of time where I was not as serious a person as I would have liked to have been. So when I was young, when I was like 13, I started reading philosophy in my house. I was lucky enough to have a mother who had all these books around the house. And so I read all these books. I thought they were really interesting. And at around the same time, I got into wrestling. And I actually mainly did wrestling because I couldn't afford jiu-jitsu. I wanted wrestling as a school sport here in the U.S. Is it in Singapore? I have no idea. I'm not sure. No. Okay.
Wrestling's not big here at all, I think.
Okay, fair enough. Well, yeah, it's pretty big in the U.S., especially in like the New York, New Jersey area. It's pretty popular. And I was lucky. I was able to do grappling in school for free. And so I wanted to do jiu-jitsu, but my mom was like, but wrestling's free. Just do that. It's close enough. So anyway, so I did that. And then as soon as I got a part-time job my senior year of high school, and I started doing jiu-jitsu pretty much around the same time. The jiu-jitsu and the philosophy were always very connected with me in terms of like I'll say that my interest in jiu-jitsu and philosophy both came from a similar place, which is I like organized systems, and I like solving problems in like a rational, deliberate fashion. Okay. Like I hate ambiguity. I think when we face challenges and problems, the degree to which we approach those problems in an ambiguous way correlates with like how unsuccessful we are at solving these problems. So if you approach something in in a way with a lot of ambiguity, it's kind of unclear about what you're even supposed to be doing. Like I always really disliked that from a young age. Like I didn't like coming at problems in a way that just left. I mean, I don't really think anybody does like coming at problems in chaotic ways, but I've always really liked organizing my thought process and approaching problems in a way that laid everything out in a clear way and gave me a step-by-step way to go about getting things done. Okay. But it's interesting. You talked about that guy that said like jiu-jitsu sort of brought him out of like that chaotic period of his life. I went through a period too where I was in college and I was just fucking around a lot. I think a lot of people have had this experience. Yeah, it's not uncommon, and I was fucking around a lot and going to parties and just not living a serious life. And I was actually talking to my teammates about this pretty recently. I was going to a lot of raves, if you can believe it. It's big.
You don't look like someone who goes to raves.
Yeah, I have some pictures to prove it. But I was super into raves, and I went to a lot. But then there came a point, I was still training and I was still going to school at the same time. But like, I was honestly fucking around a lot. Like, and then one day I was at this rave and I just felt like, it felt like it was a very empty way to live my life in this sort of like hedonistic and pleasure seeking way. And like, there's nothing wrong with those things, but that's the center. Like, it felt kind of meaningless. So basically, I always loved philosophy and jiu-jitsu, and I threw myself back into those things. And I feel, honestly, especially jiu-jitsu, I think jiu-jitsu has given me, more than anything else, the capacity to refine myself in a sense that, so like, it gives you a purpose, it gives you direction, right? As human beings, we crave meaning in our actions, right? We want what we do to have a purpose. Okay. If we're working really hard, but it feels like there's no reason to be doing this, it's very frustrating and that sort of thing leads to unhappiness. But if you have a specific purpose and direction which guides your actions, it gives this may sound strange. It gives like a flavor to your life where it's like, I'm glad I'm doing this, right? I've had so many mornings where, I have a very regimented routine, and when I'm heading to Renzo's, I always listen to music and I walk the same way. I get off the train, I have the same path, and it just feels like so good to have this discipline in my life where I meaningfully proceed towards goals, and it's not like I'm a robot. It's not like I'm doing the same thing every day, because the truth is I'm solving new problems every day. But the trick is I'm moving in the same direction every day. Okay. And that's what I think gives, I was talking to a teammate about this yesterday, actually. Like, jiu-jitsu has a power to structure your life that very few things have, because it's very physically and mentally challenging. Okay. And also, I'll say another component to it is that it's a very, very unambiguous sport. So in the sense that we're looking to tap people out. We're looking to proceed through various points and positions of control to the application of submission. Okay. And the process of doing that, there's not a lot of ambiguity, right? Like, you either get tapped out or you don't. You either tap the guy out or you don't. So you've either failed or succeeded at the goal. And the trick is like that, the process of getting better at that. Okay. It's very focused, and it's very like absorbing, right? Like, it takes all of your mental and physical energy to do it. And so as a result, what it can do is it really captures people, because for those reasons, it's very addictive. And it's an addiction that's a good thing, though, right? Like, so for instance, like a drug addiction, right? Like, that's a bad addiction because it's not improving you as a person in any meaningful way. Okay. Whereas jiu-jitsu, yeah, we can describe it as addictive, sure, but the addictive aspect of it improves you in a meaningful way. Now, the trick is that, like, so I think this is actually a really interesting part of jiu-jitsu, because I think it has that power to improve you as a person, but it doesn't necessarily do that. Okay. You have to be intentional about your practice for it to do that. Right. So, like, I think that jiu-jitsu can take a very frustrated, angry person and make them into a very happy, productive, rational person, but it won't do that for everybody. You need to approach it in the right way. You need to see it not as like a tough guy contest. We're trying to beat people up, right? There is violence involved in it. There has to be violence involved in it. If we're going to be honest about what we're doing, there has to be violence involved, okay? Otherwise, it turns into Aikido, right? No offense. I have nothing against Aikido. I'm just bringing it up. Aikido is purely for self-cultivation, okay? Mm-hmm. That's fine. Jiu-jitsu is for self-cultivation and for practical combat. Okay, so in that sense, it's a bit more practical, right? Okay, but like, so there has to be a violent component to it. Okay, but the moves we have to that we're performing actually have to be effective at hurting people. Otherwise, we're just playing games, right? Now, if that's all we're doing, though, I think you're missing a big part of jiu-jitsu, which is its capacity to allow you to actually become a better person. Okay. Like, it's very important to give this caveat, because the truth is, you see so many people that are very good at jiu-jitsu, but shitty people, right? Like, it doesn't mean that you're a good person just because you're good at jiu-jitsu. But if you look at it from the right perspective, it can make you a better person. So for instance, that guy, I've heard about that book. I've never read it, but that guy in that book, and I can say definitively for me, I feel as if I would be a much shittier person without jiu-jitsu. Like, I think I'd be a pretty grumpy guy almost all the time without it. And yeah, and as a coach, that's something also I want to impart upon people, where the truth is, not everyone is going to be a world champion, right? Like, I want to produce high-level athletes, which can hopefully become world champions, but those are not the only people I'm going to be coaching. I'm going to be coaching many other people. And for other people, the metric for success as a coach for me is not whether they win world championships, but it's whether they whether what I've taught them has meaningfully improved their lives. And I mean, kind of tricky because how do you measure that, right? Like I can't read their minds, but you know, you can kind of, I think, you can read it on people. You know, I've taught many seminars at this point, and like I feel as if I have a pretty good sense for when I'm doing a good job at this point. You know, you can kind of see it on people. Sometimes it's hard because of cultural differences, but mostly I think I can tell. Yeah.
Do you think shitty people can be good at jiu-jitsu, or it's just like they won't be around long enough to be able to practice to be good?
No, shitty people can definitely be good at jiu-jitsu. You can be good and be a pro.
He's asking for himself because he's
I'm asking for a friend.
Okay.
Yeah, he needs to do something with his life. He needs meaning.
Okay, well, there's no doubt that a terrible person can become good at jiu-jitsu. You know, just like a terrible person can become good at anything. You know, as long as you put in the time, you could be a murderer. You could have killed 30 people in cold blood. But if you do the right things in terms of your practice, you'll get good at jiu-jitsu. My point is that the less ambiguity we have in our lives, I think the more psychologically healthy we can be as people. And that can lead us to being better people. It's not like, it doesn't necessarily correlate, right? That practicing jiu-jitsu will make you a good person. Yeah, that's a myth. A lot of people say that.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I like how you're imparting life lessons into your teachings. And also, when did you realize that you want to start coaching? Did you like get blessing from Mr. Danaher himself, or you just told him one day you're going to start coaching? Or
well, what happened was I went to school for philosophy. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Queens College here in New York. And my plan was originally to get my PhD and become a professor, a philosophy professor. And I was in the process of applying to PhD programs, which is a pretty expensive and time-consuming process. And you got to apply to a bunch if you want to have a good shot of getting into a good one. And at the same time, I was training under Danaher, and he had been through the same process. He actually gave me some good recommendations for how to get into good grad schools. Because at the time I remember talking to him, and he asked me, he's like, you know, do you want to just coach or do you want to be a professor as well? And I was like, I want to do both. At the time, my main interest was being a philosophy professor. I wanted to kind of jiu-jitsu was like a very intense hobby. Like I took it very seriously. I was competing, you know, I was doing well in competing, but I still primarily wanted to be a philosophy professor. The big deciding factor for me in terms of why I switched to jiu-jitsu was the specific type of philosophy that I wanted to write about. So I really like three main types of philosophy. I like German philosophy, specifically Ludwig Wittgenstein. He's Austrian, but he wrote in German, right? So when I say German, I mean German language philosophy. I also like American philosophy, specifically pragmatism, and I like Chinese historical philosophy, specifically Zhuangzhou. I've been told I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it's the best I can do. Right.
No, we're not Chinese, so we're just agreeing.
No. No, I know. I'm saying anyone listening, they're like, ugh. Like my ex-girlfriend.
Sanzu.
Yeah, my ex-girlfriend was Chinese, and she'd always be like, "God, you're pronouncing that so bad." I'm like, "That's the best I can do."
Yeah, you'll get better when you get here, for sure.
Okay, good. Well, look forward to the practice. But regardless, I liked those three areas of philosophy. And I was told by many professors, like philosophy professors, who I wrote emails to philosophy professors whose writing I respected. And, you know, basically they all told me that like none of the things I wanted to write about were popular at the time in academia. And so one in particular, this woman named Genia Schoenbaumsfeld, she's a professor at the University of East Anglia in the UK. I really like her writing. I have several of her books behind me. And she told me, she's like, look, you're going to probably have to write about something that doesn't have to do with any of those topics because those topics are not popular right now. So you'll have to write about something else until you get tenure in like 20 fucking years. And then you write about what you want. And I was like, so why am I even doing this? Why am I going to pursue a career in academia when I'm not allowed, or not going to say not allowed, where it's difficult to write about what I actually want? right? So I thought about this, and then I thought about like, well, I can teach jiu-jitsu and I'll be able to just teach whatever I want, right? I'll be able to teach something that I love that I think is very, very, very good for people. And at the same time, like I'm never not going to love philosophy. I'll always love philosophy. I have a ton of books that I still continue to read, and I will be reading for the rest of my life because it's a topic that I enjoy. And in fact, I think it makes me a better jiu-jitsu coach too. So yeah, that was, and then I spoke once again to my coach about it because he has a perspective that very few people on the planet will have on the topic because he literally went through the same experience, right? And I came to the same decision that he did, that ultimately jiu-jitsu would lead to a happier life for me, a life where ultimately what I want more than anything else is I want a field where I can engage in long form, uninterrupted research, where I can then test the results of my research empirically. I mean, it's hard to do that in philosophy. So ultimately that was why I shifted to jiu-jitsu.
Okay, without going too deep into this, right? What do you actually really want to write about? Do you already know?
In philosophy?
Yeah.
Okay, so
what is it that people say it's like not popular enough, but what is it that's in your head that you want to write about?
Well, okay, so basically in academic philosophy, mainly what you do is you respond to previous philosophers. So you say, okay, this guy thought this, I think this is right, and this is right. I was very, very interested in the specifically the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. He wrote a lot about what he called philosophical therapy, which is the idea that so at the end of his first book, the Tractatus, it's called the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, he wrote about this, he gave this analogy that he calls a philosophical ladder, okay, which is the idea that it's an educational tool or a therapeutic tool where we can take a student and you can have them go through a process, and upon the conclusion of the process, they will they'll be better for having gone through the process. But the process itself, if you take the individual components, are meaningless. Okay, so like each individual piece doesn't do anything. It would be like, for instance, if you wanted to take, let's say you wanted to become a bodybuilder, and what's the difference between a guy who goes through an organized program of development and someone who just randomly picks up a weight here and there? Maybe they even do the same things, right? Let's say it's all the same exact movements done in the exact same way with the exact same reps, but the specific organization of the movements are different. The person who has organized his movements in a more coherent, deliberate, purposeful way, right? What Wittgenstein would describe as going through the ladder analogy, right? That's the person who's going to get better results. And there's a lot that goes into this, but basically I was interested in the reduction of ambiguity through the clarity of language and through the use of these things called Wittgenstein, this analogy, the Wittgenstein ladder. Okay. And in a sense, like I've spoken about these things already on the podcast just through the lens of jiu-jitsu, right? It's really, I'm basically interested in the same things. Not much has changed. It's just the trick is, so like academic philosophy is very fad based, right? Which is terrible. It shouldn't be like that. I think that's awful. But it's like, because you have to understand, like in philosophy. So imagine I was a geologist. I have an uncle who's a geologist. Okay. If I was a geologist, then it would be the case that the results of my research would speak for themselves. Whereas philosophy, I can just read it and be like, oh, I don't agree. You can't prove it, right? Like it's the sort of thing that Wittgenstein, again, my favorite philosopher, he once wrote, at the end of reason comes persuasion. And much of philosophy consists in that, right? It's about ultimately convincing people that our way of going about doing things is more productive or better. And of course, even in philosophy, we have to explain, what does that mean? What does more productive mean? What does better mean, right? And I love it. I think it's a very interesting thing to look at. But like I described, like it's just there's just a lot of politics in it, and like ultimately it wouldn't have led to me doing what I want to do. So in a sense, really, my philosophical interests, I'm more able to pursue them as a jiu-jitsu coach, which sounds weird, but it's true.
Hey, Robert, do you see smoke coming out from Ridhwan's ears? You just make a 20-year boxer with like years of CTE, like his brain just melted because he couldn't understand a single thing you say.
I can understand.
but I would like to add though. I mean, like how your favorite philosopher said that at the end of what was it? At the end of something was the power of persuasion or something like that.
At the end of reason comes persuasion. Yeah.
I think that sort of reminds me of how, you know, for you guys over at the DDS, like how you guys actually, you know, because the whole story from what I know is that the Danaher system revolves around leg locks. And there was a point of time where, you know, people look down on leg locks or people don't practice them at all. And it was not some, like, if you use it in a competition, in a jiu-jitsu competition, you were looked down on. But, you know, you guys managed to turn it around. And now, you know, you guys are the main system that actually, you know, are being practiced all over. Like everybody knows right now, if the DDS squad comes down, you guys are killers and they know what they're in for. So in that way, I mean, how your coach, John Danaher, he actually went beyond, you know, being a philosopher, an academic philosopher, because he actually got to kind of test and try his philosophy with leg locks, and he eventually proved it. So I think you might be doing the right thing.
Yeah. So no, that's literally exactly my point, which is that jiu-jitsu gives us a capacity to test things empirically in a way that philosophy simply doesn't. Philosophy is beautiful and very interesting and will help you to become a better thinker and will help you to clarify your thoughts. But what it won't do is give you a platform to test your ideas in an empirical way, right? In a sense, jiu-jitsu is much more like a science than a philosophy. And I really actually like the point you made about how through people had to be persuaded about leg locks, because I even think for good reason, there was a lot of doubt whether these things could be used at a high level, because historically it wasn't really the case that you saw them too frequently. You did see them. I think people would be shocked if they took a historical overview of grappling to see how frequently you saw them. You saw them more frequently than people would think. But it was true that a leg lock centric approach was never too dominant, okay, until my team came along. And the one exception to that would be, like, you could say Dean Lister and Husamar Poliaris, who are both obviously, like, my coach is pretty open about it. They're both a big influence on the system, right? Dean Lister was one of the whole reasons the system even got started. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. And it's a big part of what I love about jiu-jitsu. I also wanted to add one thing about Ridhwan and boxing and CTE. My grandpa, who unfortunately, I love him very much. Unfortunately, he just passed away. He was a professional boxer and was a really smart guy. So I think it's possible to be a boxer and be a...
Yeah, of course. Well, the smartest thing that Ridhwan has done is that he bought a new house recently, and it's right beside a mental hospital. So when the time comes when his brain gives way, he'll just need to cross the road and check in. Right, Juan?
Yep. Easy access.
I think it's also... It's
wanted to throw that out there.
Here's the funny part about how you actually, instead of pursuing your academic and then getting PhD in philosophy, you actually went the other route and you went to focus on your jiu-jitsu instead. Singapore is very well known for our education system, and we have all grown up with parents who say education first. Anything else can go eat shit and die. You know, we have kids who are like 2-3 years old in Singapore going for multiple lessons, different classes, musical classes, whatever, academic. It's all about academic here. Like, you know, for me and Juan, we're we're like third generation Singaporeans, and when we grew up, our parents constantly beat it into us. You got to do well in school. You got to do well in school. So I suspect that a few mothers have already stopped listening to us after what you said just now. But the thing is, Jiu-Jitsu itself is now a Southeast Asian sport. We have this biannual games, once every 2 years. It's called the SEA Games, the Southeast Asian Games, and we actually have Jiu-Jitsu in it. And I think it made its debut last year in the Philippines. And we actually have Singaporeans. We actually had a Singaporean who won a medal there, Benji, who was once on our podcast. Overall, what do you think about the competitive level in Southeast Asia in terms of Jiu-Jitsu? And on top of that, the additional question would be, to all the parents still listening, what are some of the benefits of Jiu-Jitsu in terms of academics? Because we all know, I come from a Malay martial arts background. Ridhwan's a boxer, obviously. Everybody here has something in common in that we believe that through martial arts we learn discipline to an extent, and we also apply that kind of discipline to other aspects of our life, like education and stuff like that. But from your perspective, you've coached a lot of people. What else do you think are the benefits for kids growing up learning jiu-jitsu and stuff like that?
Okay, so we'll first start with the first question about the level in Southeast Asia in general and in Singapore. Obviously not as high as in a place like North America or South America. The current top regions for jiu-jitsu, I would say the 4 top regions would be North America, specifically the New York, New Jersey area, certain parts of Texas, and then obviously places in California. And you could also make a case for some places in Florida too. And then Brazil, obviously, especially like places like Sao Paulo and Rio. I would even argue Australia, specifically like Melbourne, because of Absolute MMA. And then you could also make a case that Europe is coming up, right? Especially the UK, like the London area, the Grand Union squad there. However, one of my big goals as a coach is to put Singapore on the map internationally for no-gi jiu-jitsu. I want to develop students that are going to be able to do very, very well. First on the regional scene, obviously my first goal is to develop students that do well like regionally, and then have them eventually, this is a long-term goal, do well internationally, right? That's something that's going to take time, of course, right? Now, in Asia itself, I would say the top regions in Asia for grappling, probably I would say Central Asia is the best right now, like Kazakhstan, that area. Yeah, Mongolia, yeah. Kazakhstan always does well at the trials. They have like a strong wrestling background. So that helps them tremendously. Then Japan has a strong like submission. Japan has a strong wrestling background too, but they also have a very strong submissions background. So in Southeast Asia has more of a striking tradition historically, right? Like Muay Thai and things like this. But for grappling in Southeast Asia, I'd say probably the top grappling country right now in Southeast Asia is I would say Thailand. Oh, and the main reason I would say that is because there are so many like expat fighters in Thailand, like a lot of MMA guys who set up shop there, right? And then after them, I would say it's Singapore. But I think Singapore has a lot of potential because of the fact that it's very, like I said, it's very densely populated. There is interest in Singapore. I'd say there's much more interest in Singapore than in Thailand to develop good grapplers. Thailand they love striking there. That's their art, right? And most of the foreigners who go to Thailand are MMA fighters. And while they have decent grappling, it's not like they're not like trying to win ADCC trials or anything like that. One of my specific goals as a coach is going to be to produce athletes who win ADCC trials. Like that's one of my big initial goals. I want to have at least one athlete. I'd love if I could have more than one athlete win the ADCC trials from Singapore. They don't have to be Singaporean. Like I don't care. They could be Singaporean or they could be a foreigner living in Singapore, right? It's not important to me. I just want I want them to be based in, obviously if I'm based in Singapore, I want them to be based in Singapore, right? So like, I'm not going to like look at their passport like, sorry, I can't train you. Yeah. But like, but I want them to be based in Singapore and in a sense to represent Singapore, right? Like I am seeing myself as a coach in Singapore and I want my athletes also to be representing where we are, right? And so that's my big initial goal. And I'm very confident that it can be done. The biggest thing is the level of commitment and focus in the students. And that's going to come down to, I've thought a lot about how to work on this, the interest in the sport in general. Like, so for instance, I want to possibly work with people on setting up more tournaments in Singapore. I think if there are more tournaments in Singapore, yeah, like if I'm coaching people, I want them to have avenues to compete, right? Like I want my athletes to have consistent platforms to go out and practice their craft on, right? So for instance, here in the US on the East Coast, I came up on the East Coast when grappling was becoming bigger. So for instance, when I first started grappling like 10 years ago, you could go to tournaments, but not as frequently as you can now. Literally now obviously because of COVID, this isn't the case, but like before COVID, there was literally 2-3 tournaments every weekend. And that's going to come right back, right? There's already tournaments that are coming back. So it's like you always had the ability to compete very consistently. And that wasn't the case when I first started out. The reason why it became the case that more tournaments bloomed in the region was that because we started to have big competitive success on the international level. Like because of the squad, they started doing well internationally. Other people in the region, like it's sort of like if I see someone doing really well, then I believe, and they're from where I'm from, right? They're living in the same area that I live in, then I believe I can do it, right? So in Singapore, when I get there, let's say one athlete that I produce has success at the trials, I don't think a Singaporean or a Singapore-based athlete has ever won the trials yet, but I'm very confident that I'm going to change that. When that happens for the first time, I've no doubt other athletes, other people are going to look at what we're doing and say, it's possible. We can do it. No American double golded before, I'm pretty sure, Mike. I don't think any American ever double golded before Gordon. Now think about all the young athletes that can look at him and say, oh, look, it can be done. Before the Brazilians had a complete dominance on the sport. They almost, to be clear, they still are. Brazil is still the dominant country. Like the U.S. is, we're closely matching them, but we're not quite there yet. You could make an argument we are, but in terms of medal performance, we're simply not. Okay, I think pretty soon it will be very neck and neck. Now, but the point is like when the interest grows, you're going to get more committed students. So that's something that I really want to help like cultivate and foster. And it's a long-term project. I was talking to one of my friends, Oz, recently about this, who is definitely one of the most talented grapplers in Singapore. But anyway, so him and I were talking about this. I am not coming to just be in Singapore for like a year or two, right? This is a long-term project for me. I want to be in Singapore. I'm not going to give a number because I have no idea, but I am hypothetically open to being there for the rest of my life. I'm not closed off to that possibility, right? I'm thinking of myself as someone who's, I don't even, this is going to sound really like silly. My mother's side of the family came to the United States from Italy, and no one was ever like, oh, these Italian expats. They were immigrants, right? Why did they come to the United States? They came to the United States for better financial and career opportunities. That's the same reason I'm going to Singapore. So in a sense, I want to think of myself more as like an immigrant. Like I'm coming here. I'm right now a foreigner, and I am hoping to be here for a long time and do big things here. Okay. And, so yeah, those are my like short-term and long-term goals. And, as to Singapore in the jiu-jitsu community at large. And just one last thing to say about this, the ultimate long-term goal is to have ADCC gold medalists training in Singapore, right? That's, we're talking like 5 to 10 year span of time, right? Like we're not talking about anything in the near future, right? Because that takes a long time to develop. But as to the second question for all the mothers listening, if
there's any mothers listening,
I don't know. Do any mothers like this? I'm not sure. Like, listen, if there are, right? So if you're worried about like your kid not being able to pursue academics, well, you're listening and you're like, this guy, he just wants my son to just be good at jiu-jitsu and doesn't care if he's dumb. Not true at all. Like, I'm being very serious. I always encourage my athletes. So here in the US, the athletes that I've trained and developed and such, I always encourage them also to go to college and do things like that. Because the truth is, as a coach, I think you have two responsibilities. The most important thing is going to be like making sure that your athlete is good at their sport, right? That's the main thing, right? That's your main function, okay? Now, the second thing also is that as a coach, it's also good to work with them to make sure that they have a way to move forward in their career professionally, right? Now, that can come in two ways. They can do that through jiu-jitsu, or they can do that through some other means. I really don't care. It's up to them. I want them, like, if I'm going to coach an athlete, I want them to have financial security and stability, or be moving towards it, right? I think you're doing your athlete a disservice. Like, you can ask any of my current athletes that I've trained with here in the US. I always make sure that I push them to go to college. I push them to get professional training in terms of like some other field, even if it's not college, right? Because, maybe you want to be a serious high-level jiu-jitsu athlete, but maybe it doesn't work out. And if it doesn't work out, you want to have a backup plan, So I had a backup plan if jiu-jitsu didn't work out for me. I would go back to school and get my PhD, So like, I was never worried about fucking up because I had a backup plan. I had something I could fall back on. Maybe not the best thing. Philosophy isn't really, not too much money there, but it's something, right? Similarly, for my athletes, I want them to have something. And like, the thing is also, like, you have to keep in mind, there have been many successful jiu-jitsu athletes that did other things as well. If I'm not mistaken, I think Jared Dopp is a chemical engineer and he's competed at ADCC. Yeah, he's won the trials. Lachlan Giles just got a bronze. He has a PhD in physiotherapy, right? He was like doing that. He only got it, I think, like 2 years ago or something. Like, so it's really not impossible, as long as you are organized with your time management, to get a good education and also pursue jiu-jitsu. I was doing it. I was teaching jiu-jitsu. I was training very seriously, and I was going to school. I was doing all of these things, so it's not impossible at all. In fact, I would encourage it. And I think that, does jiu-jitsu help you academically? I think what it can do, as we talked about before, is give you discipline and structure. And it teaches you in a very clear way that if you do not have routine, if you do not have order in your practice, you're not going to get better and you're going to get fucked up, right? So like, and it's a short term, you learn that fast, right? Otherwise you just don't have success. People that are not organized with their jiu-jitsu typically don't go very far. And I think that's a very useful lesson for a child or a teenager to learn. But I'm not going to make the claim that like it will automatically, like if you're good at jiu-jitsu, automatically you'll be
good at maths.
Yeah. That's ridiculous. Yeah. But I do think there's a sense in which it can help. You know what I mean?
I think I really like the positivity from your side to want to develop the jiu-jitsu culture, the community. Because I think we've spoken to a few jiu-jitsu practitioners where they say that, they go for competitions and they're always rolling against the same people. But that's the thing about Singapore. The culture is a little bit different, like Iman said, it's always academics. For me, I don't have the answer, so I can't really say, but I think it takes a lot more. I think it takes even a lot more than an Olympic goal to change the sports scene, because we had Olympic medalists in swimming recently, and I don't think the sporting culture has changed. Maybe just for 2 weeks, but after that, everything's back to normal again. Nobody really gives a shit if I win a belt. It's not a huge belt, but still. It'd be great to have somebody from Singapore to win the gold medal, but I think it's going to take a lot more than that. But to have you here, I think it's going to be a huge contribution. In terms of experience and what you know and what you can teach, and maybe the introduction of system or structure in the way you do competitions, I think it's going to be a great help, though.
Yeah,
what do you think, Iman? What do you think, Robert?
Rob, you go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, I hope that I can develop that interest, because it's very important to me as a coach if I'm gonna have success. So yeah, I hope. I mean, we'll see when I get there, right? I'm very eager to get students and get started.
How do we develop interest in the first place?
Well, you have to think, what does an athlete want? More than anything else, an athlete wants a platform to compete on and have success, right? Like athletes want to win matches or games, whatever the sport is, right? So there has to be, so that means there's two things. We have to have competitions. Okay. As an athlete, you need to have goals you're working towards. And the second thing is you need to have a coach, or you don't need to, but it's beneficial to have a coach who can give you a clear direction on how to develop the right skills. Okay. So if you don't know what you need, so like if either of these things is missing, you're going to lose interest, right? So if I don't have a clear goal to work towards, if there's no competitions ever, why am I getting good at this sport? Maybe you just like it. Okay, fair enough. That's enough for some people, but for others, it's not. They need to have the competition to work towards, right? That's pretty common. The second piece of the puzzle is that if you don't have a coach who knows what they're talking about, if you're kind of just like moving in random directions, you're not gonna have success. And maybe you have the competition to go to, but you get there and you don't do well, and you get frustrated, you get pissed off, you go, fuck this thing, I don't want to do this anymore, right? I'm gonna go do something else with my time, right? Why am I putting all my energy into this and I'm not winning, right? So if you have a coach, the more knowledgeable the coach is, the easier the process for you as an athlete will be to have competitive success, because your competitive success is a combination of knowledge and skill. Knowledge is raw information. Okay. Skill is your capacity to express that knowledge on the stage. Okay. The coach has to bring you the knowledge. That's the job of a coach, right? And then to help you convert that knowledge into skill through a training program. If you don't have a coach doing that, which to be honest, most people don't, you have to find the knowledge yourself. That takes a much longer time. Okay, it's not impossible. You can do the research yourself. In fact, I love doing the research. What was great for me is that I had a coach like John Danaher who has the knowledge, and then I also am very like research oriented. So it expedites the process even further. Okay, like I'm always watching his instructionals. I'm always watching match footage. I literally, before we started this podcast, I was watching a match, like just for fun. I'm going to go train right after we're done here, like this. So I'm always working. Okay. But if you don't have that coach, again, you can still do it, but it's just a much longer process. So yeah. So I first and foremost, my job is a coach. Okay. That's my primary goal. Okay. But in addition, I would like to help the community to have more tournaments. I'm not really even sure. I mean, that's something I'm going to think about after I get there and after I start developing students. The trick is like the local tournaments. So this is something that I hope can become a part of the Singaporean Jiu-Jitsu community. I don't really know the community too well, right? I've only been in Singapore a total of like 1 month really. But something I hope is that our goal should not be to develop athletes that just win on the local level. Like that's fine, but we want to win internationally. Okay. Yeah. The local tournaments, the purpose of a local tournament is to help athletes get better. Okay. Like winning a local tournament isn't a big deal. It's about the skill you acquire from the local tournament. Okay. So the goal, so the reason for having these local tournaments is not so that, it's not so that the athletes can win medals at local tournaments. It's so that the athletes can get better, so that then they can go to the trials. They can win at the trials against athletes from other regions who are coming to win, and then win at the trials, and then eventually go to Worlds and win at Worlds, right? And so this is if you like, imagine if you never competed before going to trials, like, what are the odds you're going to do well? You could even be the best athlete. Think about it. You could be the best athlete and by far. But if you don't have that experience, you go out there and you're going to fucking freeze up and not do well. But if you have a lot of experience, you've competed many, many times before, right? then you go out there and you're like, oh, I've done this. This is not anything new, right? And you're going to perform much, much better. And so, yeah, that's something I want to help foster in the community, because there are, I know, tournaments, but not too many. And also, like, the rule sets are typically like IBJJF rules, which is not like my preferred rule set. I want to coach athletes to have success at ADCC and tournaments that are more open, sub-only style events, for instance, right, where you can do things like heel holds.
I think it's really good how, I think the BJJ community is going to be blessed with somebody who has such knowledge and experience, because I think, because Ridhwan is a boxer, so we usually talk a lot about boxing on the show, and we talk to a lot of boxers. And one of the fundamental problems with Singapore boxing is that we don't have the structure and the coaches to actually bring the sport forward. Like, a lot of our boxers are, great locally, but, the moment you bring them overseas, either in amateur boxing or in professional boxing, they lose in the first round. Yeah. Like, you travel all the way, like, Ridhwan knows he's from the amateur ranks. He'll travel like far away, and then in the end lose in the first round because not only did he lack experience, but he lacked the coaching and the structure, which is the current problem with Singaporean boxing right now. So I think if somebody like you comes in and shakes up the system and like show people how it's done, it's going to be. Either ways, it's gonna grow the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think the sport could do itself. So, Robert, are you ready to become an Angmoh in Singapore?
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean,
when you speak to the jiu-jitsu people, you gotta add in some Singlish, so they welcome you and your ideas.
Yeah. I think you won't find much of a problem in Evolve classes, because I mean they're quite diverse in how, like, having people from all over Asia. But I think once you go out into the wild, once you go to the coffee shops, once you go to the hawker centers, you gotta, like, what do you drink coffee? What coffee do you like?
Yeah, I got coffee right here.
How do you like your coffee?
Just plain black, no milk, no sugar.
Yeah, so over here you have to say, like, hey auntie, can I get a kopi o?
Okay. Hey auntie, can I get a kopi o?
Yeah. So
like
coffee is kopi.
Kopi, okay.
And the o means nothing inside.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Hey auntie, can I get a kopi o? Which, if I say that, are they gonna look at me like, what the?
Yeah, they're probably like, what the fuck? Get the fuck away from it. And then when you put the auntie into a leg lock.
Okay. What is auntie? What does that mean?
Auntie, aunt. It's an aunt.
Oh, okay.
So when we go to hawker, I'm not sure. Have you ever been to a hawker center here?
I don't know what that is. Maybe.
Okay, a hawker center is basically a food court.
Okay. Yes, I have. Yeah.
Where there's like thousands of different shops.
Yeah.
Different variety of food. So I mean, that's the one thing about Singapore. That's our food culture. We're quite good on our food culture. So we frequent. Some people call it food court. Some people call it coffee shops. The Chinese people will call it kopitiam. But basically, every guy who sells you food is an uncle there, and every lady who sells you food is an auntie there. So we'll just go, hey auntie, hey uncle, can I get this? Can I get that? So I mean, you're most likely gonna gain a few pounds when you get here for sure.
Okay, good. Yeah, good. I mean, I actually love the food. That was another part. Like the prata I had in Little India was some of the best. That changed my culinary tastes. The one thing I will say about food in Singapore, this is the worst part about moving to Singapore, and I'm not even joking a little bit. The lack of good pizza is egregious. Like,
yes, correct.
I can't believe there's no good pizza. Like I was like, people were telling me like the pizza's all shit. I was like, there has to be like some Italian guy somewhere cooking pizza up that's good. And like, you can't even get anywhere. So that's another, I'm going to have to change that somehow.
Do you know why there's no good pizza?
No idea.
Because who needs pizza when you have prata, man?
No. I love prata.
How much is the prata in New York? How much is the prata in New York?
It's a lot. I had prata the other day at this place called Ridhwan. It was $4 a piece.
Oh shit!
$4 a piece.
Yeah. And we pay
just the plain one.
Just a plain prata with chicken curry.
It's probably instant.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was good. You know, I mean, not as good as the prata I got in Singapore, but it was still fairly solid. That place that I got, it's actually in Connecticut, so not even in New York, but like best prata I've had outside of Asia. Yeah, and I'll say about the me being an Angmoh thing. So like, I had two experiences which I really liked in Singapore that I've never had in any other country, including Europe. Like, I've never had this happen to me anywhere else. On two separate occasions, and also I spent more time in Singapore than any other foreign country, so I guess the odds of it happening go up. But twice in Singapore, I had people ask me for directions, and both times they were Asian. So yeah, I was like, so one time I was sitting by the Asian Civilizations Museum, like I had just trained that morning, and I was sitting in like some shorts and a t-shirt with a backpack, and I was eating, I don't remember what, something, I think a sandwich. But this woman comes up to me. She looked probably like she was Malay, and she had her whole family there, and she was like, she had her husband and her kids. She's like, hey, we're looking for blah, 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 this place, and we're not sure where it is. And I was like, oh, I have no idea. And she goes, okay. And I was like, I would ask that guy. And I pointed to like some like cart vendor. And then I was curious. I asked her, I was like, why did you ask me for directions? And she's like, you just looked like you knew your way around the place. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, it's like, that's wild.
Must be the beard. That's why.
What's that?
Must be the beard. That's why.
The beard?
I don't think it's the beard.
So what I liked about that was that to me, it conveyed that in this woman's mind, I have no idea. She's probably not, almost definitely not from Singapore, right? Otherwise she would know her way around. But like, she looked at me and her first thought wasn't like, this guy doesn't belong here, right?
It
like,
wasn't hostile. It was like welcoming, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, not even that. Like, of course, I mean, I wouldn't expect hostility, but even just that, she thought to ask me for directions. And then there was a second time where I was at the Alginede MRT station, and this like pretty old Chinese guy, it's like he's got like a cane and he's like hobbling around, and he asked me for I don't remember what he asked me, but he asked me how to get somewhere, and I was like, I have no idea. And then I helped him get a taxi. I was like, this guy will know. And then he went on his way. And I was like, wow, this old Chinese guy looked at me and thought, oh, I'll ask this white dude for directions. So like,
you should.
Like, what's that?
No, you should. Next time when somebody asks you for direction, you should just like confuse them even more by answering in Singlish. Like you just go, I don't know lah. You know, like
okay.
Yeah, he has to go there. Like when you're the beauty about the word la in Singlish is that it changes according to your mood, right?
Okay.
So if you sound a bit like bothered or pissed, you're like, I don't know la. You know? Right. So if you sound like you're being like naggy, you're like, I don't know la. So you once you get here, you'll know like the la is being used like to different effects.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I've been told I have talked to some of my Singaporean friends, and they're like, you're using it wrong. And I'm like, what? I just thought you just threw it anywhere. Like just at the end of any sentence. Like, this food is so good, la. Like,
that's fine, actually. That's quite
that was good.
Yeah.
It was okay.
I thought I was intentionally using it incorrectly there. So you see, I mean, I just need more exposure to the dialect, and then I'll get it.
Yeah. First you learn the Singlish. First you learn the las, and then you start learning the Hokkien swear words, and that's when you know you're home.
Okay. What's the most offensive Hokkien swear word I could say to people?
We'll tell you off air. I think if we say on air, enough. We might get demonetized.
Fair enough.
But yeah, we'll teach you a few words that the next time you roll with someone here, then you just pop like once you make them tap out, you just say it to them, and they'll probably like go home crying.
Oh my god! Right, I'll keep that for when the students, when they're misbehaving, I'll throw this at them and like I'll really abuse them with that. I
think one of the other thing about Singapore that I mean both me and Juan, we were born and we grew up here. But I think one of the things that when we have friends who come into Singapore, they get a little bit bored really quickly because there's not much. It's not that there's not much going on, but we don't have a lot of space. So, maybe max a week, you kind of discover most of the things that you need to discover in Singapore. So then you got to, kind of try to keep yourself sane and entertained. So, tell us, other than jiu-jitsu and philosophy books, what else do you like to do outside of those things?
Not that much.
And you're perfect in Singapore because there's nothing much to do.
Yeah. So when I first came to Singapore and I made some local friends, we were out getting food one time and we're sitting around and we're talking and they were like, the big thing about Singapore is that it's just like a boring bubble where like you're safe and you can work really hard and move towards your goals, but there's not a lot of fun things to do. And I was like, that sounds great. Like, that's exactly what I want. Like, because like I'm not like I told you guys, like when I was younger, I went through a period where I went to a ton of raves, and like I just have no interest in that anymore. Like it's just not appealing to me anymore. Like I am essentially an old man at this point. Like I just want to I want to work in my chosen field. I want to engage in research in that field. I want to develop students, and I have some. Okay, so here are my hobbies. My hobbies are, I like watching terrible movies. If anyone has seen my stories recently, I've been defending the Star Wars prequels very adamantly. Like, I like the Star Wars prequels.
Which one? 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, I think they're great.
Dude, me too, man. I've been preaching that for years. People just don't get it.
So I went on like an IGTV live, just like an IG live thing. And I welcomed all arguments and I like tried to refute them to my best ability. Because it's like, guys, these are movies made for children. Like people are complaining about all these things, and it's like look, I grew up when I was a kid, I watched the original Star Wars on like VHS tape. And I was also at the age where the prequels were like in theaters. So I saw the prequels in theaters and the originals on VHS tapes, and I liked all of them. I thought they were all really good. I remember thinking in the theater for episode 1, I think I was like 6. I remember thinking to myself, I can't believe movies can be this good. Like I really liked it. I had never seen a movie I liked that much. And I feel like all these people complaining about these movies are like, guys, you're like a 4-year-old man and you're screaming because of Jar Jar Binks. It's like, you know what I mean? It's not that serious. And like, I love these movies, and even if there's stuff in them there is stuff that's stupid. Like Jar Jar Binks is kind of annoying, and there's stuff that's like dumb and like, but it's like people took this stuff so seriously.
Yeah.
But like, so my hobbies are basically like, I'm like very stereotypically nerdy in some sense. Like I played a lot of video games as a kid. I don't play too many now just because I don't really have the time for it, but I do still like them. I play Dungeons and Dragons a lot. So fun fact about me that maybe a lot of people don't know is I met my first girlfriend when I was 18 playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's like, yeah, I got invited to one of my friends' Dungeons and Dragons games. That's how I met my first girlfriend.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's who I am, I guess. And I like a lot of things like that. Like I'm always like reading. Like I like science fiction a lot and stuff like that. And like, yeah, I don't really have too many hobbies. Like I really, really like jiu-jitsu. And my biggest hobby would be like, I would call philosophy my biggest hobby. Like I like reading, I like studying, and but I'd say like 80% of my time is consumed with jiu-jitsu. I've thought about when I moved to Singapore, maybe picking up another hobby or two. When I was in high school, I played paintball, and I looked up, I saw there were some fields and in Singapore, and I thought, well, maybe trying that again for fun, like just having something else light to do to just sort of like take my mind off of jiu-jitsu. But yeah. Oh, I guess the big hobby that I forgot was I like trains. I like subways. So like right behind you can see it right there. I have
Sounds like my kid.
I have I have 3 train systems. That's the Paris Metro.
Yeah.
That is the London Underground, and at the bottom is the Singapore MRT.
Yeah, I was going to say the bottom one looks familiar.
Yeah, that one's the MRT, and I like subways. I'm from New York, where we have a great train system. It's very easy to get around here with them, and I feel like I like them for a lot of reasons. But I just think that they're a fun thing to read about and look at. So I guess that's like a big hobby of mine. Yeah.
You're missing Thomas and Friends. So my son will.
Not that I'm not into that kind of train.
I was gonna say you're gonna love it in Singapore because in between your classes you can hop on a train and probably ride the whole way around for like half an hour and then come back to the same place to do your next class.
Yeah, when I was looking at apartments, I was specifically trying to find one that was like a 30-minute train ride away from Evolve Far East Square. Because people are like, oh, you could get one like right next, like walking distance. I was like, yeah, but like it's part of my train. Yeah, it sounds silly, but like, so I've always had to take trains here in New York. It's always a part of like my morning routine. And it feels very like normal to me, right? And I like that. And so in Singapore, it's another thing that I'm hoping to, it's sort of like, it's like New York, but better. The trains are cleaner. And I like having that as part of my morning routine, waking up, doing a few things, putting my iPod in my ears and getting on the train and driving to training / work.
Yeah, I guess if you want to stay 30 minutes away from Far East Evolve, that will be near my house. next to the mental hospital. Welcome to the neighborhood, brother.
Well, then again, people also say everything is 30 minutes away in Singapore because we're so small. So
right,
you could be anywhere. One thing is for sure, we don't have people peeing on our trains.
That's great.
And if you see anybody who pees on our train, probably not Singaporean.
Right. Well, it's funny. Like my first time ever in Singapore was the second foreign country I ever visited. I'd been to the UK and then I went to Singapore. At this point, I've been to like a lot more, but at that time I hadn't. And so, and Singapore was my first Asian country I ever visited. So I got on here in New York, eating on the train is just a normal thing. Like everyone just does it. Nobody, yeah. So I didn't know. So I had McDonald's. I was eating some French fries, and I get on the train. Yeah, I get on the train, and this police officer, he was pretty nice. He obviously knew I had no idea. He came up to me. He's like, "Hey, you can't eat that." And I was like, I didn't understand why. I was like, "What?"
I paid for this shit.
Yeah, I was like, "These are my fries." And he's like, "No, you can't eat it on the train." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I put it away, So 4 more times throughout that trip and another trip when I came back to Singapore, I accidentally, I would reach in, I would eat something for a second, I'm like, oh shit, wait, can't do this. But I could be like, it's such an ingrained habit that I'm not even, because I'm so used to it not being a big deal. But then it's but I like that rule. Like I think it's a good rule to have because it keeps the trains much cleaner. When you compare, I've been to Taiwan as well and taken the trains there. And when you compare the trains there and in Singapore, and Taiwan has the same rules about eating. When you compare them with for instance, the New York trains or with any of the European train systems I've taken, they're much cleaner by comparison. The European trains are typically cleaner than the New York ones, but they're kind of in the middle. Anyway, I do got to get going in 5 minutes. My teammates are here. We're heading to training.
Right. I mean, we're just gonna wrap it up. Also, I think one of the last things that I want to ask you is that for anybody who's listening right now who wants to be in your class, Evolve has a certain reputation where you walk in, there's monsters in the class, there's murderers in the class, all the top people in Southeast Asia train there. How would you welcome them and what would you tell them, to just come in and, it's no one's going to kill you.
Yeah, hopefully not. You're going to want your money back if they're killing you. Yeah, no. So So I've had a lot of questions about people asking, can I take your classes? I'm just a white belt with one stripe or something, right? Like, yeah, anyone can take my classes of any belt level, any age, anything really. I don't care. The only thing that I care about is that you come and you're focused and you're trying to learn. Okay. Even so I had a dad message me saying, hey, my son's 13. Can he come to your classes? I welcome that because I think young people are some of the best learners because they're very receptive to new information and they're at an age where they still have a lot of time to develop. So I believe me, seriously, very, very much welcome that. My classes will be very open to anyone that wants to take them. My classes will be very regimented and structured. You're really always going to know what you're going to get. We're always going to do 30 minutes of technique. Each class will be about 2 to 3 techniques. And it's always going to be organized. Like we're not doing random stuff. We're going to have sequences of what we work on. And then we're always going to do 6 rounds of 5 minutes of rolling, no breaks. Just like this is how we do it at Renzo's. We don't do any breaks in between the rounds. I think it's better that way. It's harder, but you develop good cardio and, it pushes you mentally and physically. You got to be able to perform the techniques under stress. Okay. And we're always going to do 3 positional rounds, and they're going to be roughly the same positional rounds. This is, again, what we do at Renzo's. I learned this from my coach, and it's how I've always trained, and I really like it. So I'm implementing the same teaching strategy at Evolve. And then we're going to do 3 open rounds. And then the truth is, the reality is that I will continue probably to roll. I'm going to roll in every class. And then we're also going to roll probably some extra rounds after the 6 rounds are done. So long as it's going to be contingent upon is there no other class on the mat, right? Like if there's another class coming, we need to get the fuck out of there. But other than that, I'll probably still roll, because I love it, and to anyone, if you're curious what the rounds are going to be, the positional rounds, so far what I've planned is it's pretty similar, though a little bit different than what Danaher does. The first round is going to be turtle. So you start in the turtle position and then you alternate, right? So turtle is one of the most important positions. I want all my students to be very, very good at attacking from there. All elite grapplers have to be good at that position. And then from there, I'm still debating what the other 2 positional rounds are going to be. I think one of them will be probably 50-50. The leg lock position, but it might be another leg lock position. I'm not sure quite yet. I'm still debating internally. And then the third one might be the mount, practicing pins and pin escapes. That's really important too, but I'm not sure. I might do something else with that round, but I'm going to decide by the time I get there, and they'll be very consistent, and they're designed to help you improve in positional rounds are very important because it forces you to improve in specific areas that maybe won't happen every live training session if all the roles are free, right? You have to force students, you don't have a choice. Every class you have to work the turtle because it's round. So you're going to get better at it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Robert, we're looking forward to you coming to Singapore and actually growing the BJJ scene here. Nice. I think the structure and the knowledge that you bring is going to be beneficial to a lot of people. And also, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it. You blessed us with your show, even though we don't know much about BJJ. And, hopefully when you come to Singapore, we can all catch up and we can go get prata.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be great.
Brilliant. Do you want to do a shout out on, do you want to thank anybody and stuff like that and where people can find you?
Sure. Yeah. So just shout out to all my training partners here in New York that I'm abandoning. Shout out to
peace out, motherfuckers.
Yeah. See you guys.
You already sound Singaporean.
Yeah. Oh, great. Shout out to my coach. I definitely wouldn't have gotten here without him. So it means a lot. And also shout out to Gary for helping me, get in touch with you guys for the podcast. Gary Tang is who I'm specifically referring to. And also just if you guys are interested in finding more out about me, definitely check out my Instagram. You can go on Facebook too, but I'm really not on there that much. Instagram is my name, Robert Degle, Degle, and then BJJ. That's the best place to message me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Juan, do you have any shout outs? Quick one.
For those of you who want to know more about boxing, follow me, tcw.legends. I just want to say thank you, Robert. It feels like I've been promoted to a blue belt just by having you here in our show. And
Thanks,
thank you. Really looking forward to meeting you in person. I might want to start. I did jiu-jitsu once, so I might get back on it. Maybe, I don't know.
All right, as one continue to dream on, to beat CTE and by doing BJJ, we'll have to wrap this up. Remember, this is the One Man Show, the #1 fight podcast in Singapore. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and especially Spotify. We talk all about Singapore fighters and the Singapore fight scene. This is the One Man Show. We're out.
And I remember thinking to myself, wow, Florida is the cleanest place in the world.